right. So I want to start off with a quote out of David Hawkins' book, Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. Some of you may remember that last year, it was either January and February or February and March, this was like our Bible. And what an amazing book. The last book that he published just before he died, and it is just such a phenomenal, not just a read, but it's a technique. Letting go so that you can open up to living a life of peace, of loving kindness, of compassion for yourself and for everyone around you. So he writes in there, and this is out of the chapter on anger, we need to be aware that we have unwittingly become injustice collectors. We are unconsciously programmed to believe that injustice collecting is normal. In contrast to this habitual pattern, which is destructive and weakening, letting go frees us from keeping close account of the wrongs made against us. Our time and attention are freed up to see the beauty and opportunity around us. And so I'm going to chunk that down a bit because there was a lot in there. But the reason that this quote just jumped out, like I opened the page, just opened the book, and there it was, and I thought, yes, this is the way that Spirit works. And I wanted something out of this book because right now, as many of you know, there is a forgiveness class that is happening on Saturdays, and we had our third class yesterday. Glenn and I are in a class on Monday nights through the Global Truth Center Los Angeles called Quantum Habits. And so we are noticing. Every single moment we are noticing and becoming more aware of what is it that we are paying attention to, what are the choices that we are making, and not just what are the choices that we are making, but what level of consciousness and awareness is behind those choices. So yesterday in class, we were talking about what forgiveness is not. In the book of Forgiving by Bishop Desmond Tutu and his daughter, Reverend Mpo Tutu, then it says that forgiveness is not 5 different things. Weakness, forgetting, subverting injustice, easy, and quick. Okay? Now, those are tendencies, there's a collective consciousness, beliefs around forgiveness is not all this stuff. It could be, and sometimes it is. But sometimes someone that we think we have forgiven, someone we even have forgiven, we got to do it all over again. And sometimes it can take a long time. Sometimes it can be very challenging. And sometimes because we are so aware, we are so anchored in the truth of who and what we are, in the truth of who and what this other person is, of what the situation is, that it can be instantaneous and we don't even realize that we've gone through this incredible process of forgiving. Okay, so the work is to do it over and over and over again, to be so consistent, to make it so habitual that it becomes automatic and spontaneous, rather than something that is laborious, something that is hard, something that is challenging, something that takes a long, long time. And the main thing here that I want to focus on today, that it is never, ever, ever, ever about condoning what happened or what was said. It is never about sweeping it under the rug. It is not about spiritual bypassing. It's all good. It's all God, right? Things need to be accounted for. People need to be accountable for their actions. And yet, if we focus on that stuff that happened, on the way that we were wronged, or even the way we may have wronged someone or harmed someone, then what we are doing is we are inadvertently being those injustice collectors, okay? And we are focusing on the wrong, the hurt, the revenge, the anger, the pain, whatever it is that comes along with that incident. We're focusing on that rather than on the truth of who and what we are, the truth of who and what the other party may be or is, and how capable we are of overcoming that, of working through that. And so we talked about, all of these different things, and people were offering their shares, and people brought their salient points from the 2 chapters that we were working on. And I have permission to share this story from my husband, Glenn. So he offered, when he was talking about forgetting, that he has this drawer in his nightstand where he tends to shove all these little writings and things that he does. Sometimes they're on crumpled pieces of paper, sometimes they're on neatly folded pieces of paper. But an idea or inspiration will come to him, whether it's part of a play he's writing or, his screenplay or just, a super cool thought. He writes it down, puts it in his pocket, and then at night he shoves it in the drawer and forgets about it, right? And so there was this idea of this is what happens in life, right? Like there are things that happen to us, there are things that we do, and we just kind of shove them in a drawer and we forget about them. And then at the most bizarre time, seemingly out of the blue, they'll pop up and we're like, whoa, where did that come from, right? And so there was more that he was offering, but the thing that happened for me was when he started talking about this drawer, for me, this drawer is a because there's all of these crumpled pieces of paper in there that I know are there every time I walk by the drawer. And sometimes I see it open, and for me, I'm like, why can't you just organize them? But it's not my drawer, right? It's not mine to organize. It's Glenn's to do whatever it is that he wants to do with it. But the point I made was that when we're not in harmony with who and what we are, when we're not in alignment, the way that we are can unwittingly spill over onto everyone and everything around us without us realizing it and without someone else realizing that, oh, this is kind of what's happening. Because it's all energy, right? It's all energy. We are all energy. And so it stands to reason that what happens, in one sort of atmosphere, if you will, or bubble, is going to influence or inform another atmosphere or bubble that may be close by, like when we live with someone, like when we have a life partner, right? Now, what came to me this morning was something even sort of further and deeper into that, because yesterday, as always, we were talking about choice and personal responsibility and how it's up to us to live our lives. We're the ones that choose. Nobody is living our life for us. Nobody is making our choices for us. Even if it seems that way, we are the ones who decide how we respond. We are the ones who choose how we move forward from one now moment to the next and the next and the next. And so choice is what came into this. But this morning for me during meditation, it was, wait a minute, it's also consciousness. Because consciousness is everything. I mean, I just said energy is everything. Energy, consciousness, whatever you want to call it. But consciousness with a capital C and a small c, like awareness, but consciousness, who and what we are, is everything. And the reason that that drawer is for me, because it's not in alignment with who and what I am. I can consciously choose to accept, and I can do it again and again and again, and I do. And yet, the underlying thing is, it's not in alignment with the harmony and the order of my being. So it will likely forever bother me unless I am really focused on I'm fine with it. So the consciousness was a part of it. The consciousness that we're embodying when we are making these choices. Are we creating our life experience from the stuff that is going on around us, the stuff that has happened to us, the stories that we've been telling again and again and again? Or are we navigating all of that as the love that we truly are, as the infinite potentiality that we truly are, as the yet untapped possibilities of who we can be as we show up as who and what we truly are? And so we started talking about the fourfold path in this forgiveness book, which is telling the story, naming the hurt, granting forgiveness, and then either renewing or releasing the relationship. And we're just getting started on walking the fourfold path. So we're just in the telling the story part, okay? But the naming the hurt and the telling the story, these are really important steps. Because if you skip over that to going right to granting forgiveness, then you're doing what we call spiritual bypassing. And what it means is you're ignoring that something happened. You're ignoring the importance, the essential, whatever it is that was meant to be learned and gleaned from that experience, and trying to skip right over to, it's all good, it's all God. So even though it's important not to dwell on where we have been, it is important sometimes to recognize that this happened. This happened, and then now we get to choose how we respond to it. And so walking this fourfold path is all about, this is what happened, this is how it made me feel, and now this is what I'm choosing to do moving forward and how I'm choosing to be in relation to other people. And there are stories in this book of forgiveness that are just incredible. I mean, some of them are instantaneous, And some of them, it's just like, wow, I can only imagine what it must have been like for that parent, to see the person, the mother, to see the person who killed her daughter, like who intentionally killed her daughter, and then to forgive that person, and now to be working together and going to different, centers, communities, whatever, talking about the experience and talking about the power of forgiveness. So many stories like that. And one story of a mother who, her husband and her daughter went on a meditation retreat, I think it was, to India, and the last thing that she said to them was, "I love you." And every day they talked on the phone or they Skyped or whatever it was that they did. And then one day she didn't hear from them for a while, second day nothing. And then she found out that terrorists had attacked the hotel that they were staying at, and it turned out that they had been killed. And instantly she forgave the terrorists. Instantly. And it was because there were no withholds, there was nothing percolating under the surface, there was nothing. "I love you" was the last thing that they said to each other. And so she was clear. Her friends and family thought she was nuts. How can you possibly, And so it's so amazing to hear these stories, and these are some of the stories that are coming out in our class too, which is just so sacred, so profound, which is partly why I mentioned last week how it is, to what Linda just said, so incredible to see people feel so safe and so accepted here as we are building community together. I don't know if I've ever been a part of that. And so for me, it is profound. And I just applaud everyone who is part of this community for being as brave as you are. So the other reason that I wanted to mention this today is because yesterday, there are a few people here who went to the memorial, the celebration of life for Reverend Carrie Hunter, who for about a decade was the senior minister of the Center for Spiritual Living Victoria. And so at the end of last year, she was diagnosed with a terminal illness with about 3 weeks to live. She managed to hang on for another almost 4 months or so with her family in Banff. And my understanding is that she died at peace. And so yesterday was an opportunity for people in Victoria to come together and to honor her and to celebrate her and to remember her. And so everybody had their own relationship with Carrie, and there were people there who had been with her for decades. There were people who had only known her for a couple of years. And we were somewhere in between. And so for me, Carrie was a powerhouse. When I wrote a letter to CSL Victoria as we were leaving Toronto to say, "Hey, we're coming." And Reverend Joanna was actually the first person that we met there. But Reverend Carrie was the one that we ended up seeing the second week when she came back. And immediately she invited us over to her house for dinner. And I'm like, "Whoa, we're hanging with the clergy. This is awesome." And we went over to her house for dinner. She asked us to bring dessert, and she opened her door wide to her condo. When we walked down the hallway, we brought her the dessert. Thank you, Sandy. And then she, whatever it was, I don't even remember what I made at that point, but it was something, delicious and delectable. And she just said, "Oh my gosh, thank you. Well, you can go now." And then she took it inside, and that was it. And she just had this very sort of smile on her face and was just so joyful and everything. And that evening, we felt so welcome, so incredibly welcome. And for several years, we felt very welcome in that community. And then eventually, it wasn't the right fit for us anymore, and so we moved on. And yet, Carrie was still a big supporter for me. And so it was really interesting to me to be there yesterday and to hear all of these stories and all of these accolades and all of this stuff about her, most of which I knew, but some I didn't. But the two offerings that moved me the most were when someone came up to the front and said, and offered an opportunity to talk to Carrie. If there was anything, if there were any withholds, if there was anything that hadn't been said yet, to take the time right now to say what hadn't been said. To open up, to listen to what she might want to offer if she were still physically in this realm. And what an opportunity it was to just be with what was, sort of do those first two things of telling the story and naming the hurt, and then be in the space of forgiveness. You know, it's just so powerful. It wasn't even 5 minutes, and it was so beautiful. And I was so grateful that someone came up to do that, because the rest of it was very positive and inspiring and happy, and she was all those things. But like all of us, we all have our foibles, we all have our flaws, right? And so that to me was very authentic and very moving. And then towards the end, someone came up and talked about her relationship, her friendship with her, and that just brought me to tears, because it was also incredibly authentic. And I'm just so, so grateful that those two people came up to speak like honest to goodness, authentic, the good, the bad, and everything in between, you know, truth. Because that's what we all are. You know, it's not just about the good stuff, it's everything, right? Now, the other reason that I wanted to mention this, sorry. The whole point of that was leading to afterwards, during the time when we were sitting and having coffee, then I was in conversation with a couple of ladies, and they were talking about downsizing their homes, and one of them was talking about some videos she saw on YouTube where the guy who was talking about how to declutter and downsize said, "Nobody wants your stuff." And the line just stuck with me, because I'm like, okay. And then she proceeded to talk about, you know, like nobody wants to go through your stuff. Nobody wants to categorize or organize or throw out or whatever. We've done it for some people, so we know how laborious that can be, where you're like, even going through your own stuff, you know, like, I love you, thank you, you've brought me joy. Okay, right? Thank you, Marie Kondo. So the title of my talk today is, Nobody Wants Your Stuff. And the reason that I called it this is because as I think about what happens when we let go or when we hang on to things, we're dragging all of this excess stuff along with us from one relationship to another. And is it doing us any good? You know, like there's a time and a place for anger. There's a time and a place to be sad. There's a time and a place for grief. And grief is a whole other ball of wax, and it takes as long as it takes. But there also comes a time where it's time to let go. It's time to release, because the only way that we can show up as our true selves is when we are open and reaching for more, right? We cannot be our true selves as we're holding on and hoarding and dragging things along that are weighing us down. I mean, we can try, but it's challenging. So the work is to let go of whatever anger, whatever resentments, whatever is getting in the way of you connecting with someone, light to light, heart to heart, love to love, God to God. Okay? Because that's what it's all about. We are here to remember who we are. We are here to champion each and every one of us to remember who they are. Right? This life that we're living, it's a blip on the eternality of the infinite potentiality of spirit, God, source, the quantum field, creativity, whatever you want to call it. And so why would we want to drag all of this stuff around instead of really connecting, having intimate relationship with our family, with our friends, the people that are around us, really understanding each other? Which brings me to a very, very sad event, an incident that happened last night in Vancouver at the Lapu-Lapu Festival, the Filipino festival, where someone intentionally drove their car into the crowd and 9 people were killed and several others were injured. Okay, so it's grown since I saw the news. Thank you. Whatever the numbers are, whatever happened, whatever was going through the mind of the person who was driving the car, that's not ours to understand. It's not ours to make sense of, okay? And I can only imagine how everyone who is directly impacted by that incident might be feeling today, the gamut of emotions. It's not to dismiss any of that, right? People have lost loved ones, and they are going to go through it for as long as it takes. And yet, if we are here saying that there's only one thing going on, that love is all there is, that everyone and everything is God, then we know that each person who was killed, each person who was injured, each person who witnessed, who lost someone, and the person who drove the car is God. And we get to focus on how are we going to process that information. Are we going to focus on the anger, the hatred? There's a time and a place for it. Work through it, but don't stay there. Because ours is to focus on compassion and love and peace. Bishop Desmond Tutu writes, "It is a remarkable feat to be able to see past the inhumanity of the behavior and recognize the humanity of the person committing the atrocious acts." So forgiveness is not about excusing, condoning, or bypassing, okay? And what I want to do is I want to read, I want to read a passage from here, from this book. They have a little section that always says, "Let us pause to listen to what the heart hears." "You have stood at this junction before, you will stand at this junction again. And if you pause, you can ask yourself which way to turn. You can turn away from your own sadness and run the race named revenge. You will run that tired track again and again, or you can admit your own pain and walk the path that ends. In this direction lies freedom, my friend. I can show you where hope and wholeness make their homes, but you can't push past your anguish on your way there. To find the path to peace, you will have to meet your pain and speak its name." So to finish off, all of us have been harmed, and all of us have harmed in some way, okay, whether we're aware of it or not. People are not their actions, their behavior, yet we are all responsible for our actions and our behavior, right? Every single moment we are at choice, and just as important the choice is, it's also important to really anchor ourselves in the truth of who we are as we're making that choice, okay? And if the choice that we just made isn't in alignment with the wholeness, the allness, the love that we truly are, we get to choose differently in the next now moment, right? So as we let go of our stuff, we open up to experiencing more compassion, acceptance, and unconditional love for ourselves and each other, which leads to more loving kindness and peace experienced in our world. And back to the meditation quote that we had this morning, with every release, I realize more of who and what I am. And with every release, I recognize more of who and what everyone and everything is. Thank you, and so it is.